man who has to crown himself, you might think, has a problem. But in 1967, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, was riding high. Oil revenues had made him rich and powerful. And although his secret police were notorious for their cruelty, he was not an obvious tyrant as his father had been. The Shah's youth had been lived in his father's shadow, and his early years as ruler of Iran had been shaky. But by 1967, he felt more secure. His dynasty had shaped modern Iran. The new Iran, which Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi helped create, was a modern wonder of the world. And all because of oil, the black manna of the 20th century. For more than 30 years, the Shah presided over the growth of this new Iran, but all the time, pressing at his back, there was the old Iran of peasant tribes whose condition had hardly changed since 1919, the year of his birth.
Old Iran was a medieval country. It was really a survival into the modern age of a society which would have been very familiar to the people of medieval France or England. It was not really a country. The people had very short lives. They were racked by disease and banditry and poverty. It was a country which was so powerless that it was dominated from the outside. It was dominated in the north by the Russians and in the south by the British. They had quarreled over Persia for 100 years, and they'd agreed to let each other alone and take what they wanted in Persia. The Persians were permitted to have what was left, and that wasn't very much.
The demand for oil in the 1920s was not what it became later. The British controlled the Persian Gulf and held the oil concessions. When the effete Persian monarchy proved unable to throw off the habits of centuries, Mohammad Reza's father stepped in to seize power himself.
The old Shah was a giant of a man. He stood perhaps 6'8". No one actually knows his origins. He came up out of the desert. He was a camel driver. He joined the Cossack regiment. He became a sergeant in that. He was known for his cruelty, his iron will, his ability to get ahead, and maneuvering in the shadowy currents of a decadent empire. He became a colonel, and from that position of vantage, he was able to maneuver the decaying regime out of Persia and seize it himself.
So Reza Shah, a man without a family name, mounted the peacock throne and had himself crowned Shah in Shah, King of Kings.
The old Shah thought he was founding a dynasty, and for that dynasty, of course, he had to have a son, and his son had to be a ruler in his own image. The son was the man who became known as Mohammad Reza Shāh. This young man showed every sign of growing up to be what his father could only consider something of a weakling. Finally, the old man took this young son and sent him off to school in Switzerland. His principal interest was girls, and he liked to race about in fast cars with young ladies.
Reza Shah was the product of a nationalist revolution, little different from those of today, except he saw no need for ideological pretense.
The hero of the old Shah and the model for the old Shah was Kemal Pasha, also known as Atatürk, the great modern Turkish nationalist leader who tried to take the Turkey that was the sick man of Europe and turn it into a modern nation. Shah saw himself in that role. He tried to manipulate the great powers, the Russians, the British, and he brought the Germans in as middlemen. And he had the Germans build a railroad for him. It was typical of his peasant cunning that he was not going to build a railroad that could be used by his enemies to attack him. And therefore, on the southern end, he stopped his railroad about 60 miles short of the Persian Gulf, where the British, of course, were ensconced. And in the north, he stopped his railroad about 60 miles short of the Caspian because he didn't want the Russians to get on that railroad and come down to Tehran and destroy him. It was unprofitable in any economic sense, but he had his railroad, and that was a symbol of the modern Persian.
In 1939, the Shah chose a bride for his son, marking the occasion with a lavish celebration, reminiscent of Persia's past glory. She was the 17-year-old Fawzia, a sister of King Farouk of Egypt. It was a diplomatic marriage, which the old Shah hoped would launch his heir into the world and help legitimize his rule. But the union produced a daughter only and was not a success. Then came World War II, and the power game in Persia suddenly became deadly serious. Her geographical location enabled the British and Russians to join forces in the global struggle against Germany, while her oil supplies were vital to Russia's war effort. Persia's strategic importance proved to be the old Shah's undoing.
When Germany invaded Russia, she cut off the normal supply routes to Russia, and the Persian route was the only land route which could be used. And in order to accomplish that, of course, they had to have the agreement or the acquiescence of the Shah. And the Shah, who was a very independent and powerful man, was not going to be rolled over very easily, and the British and the Russians were not inclined to toy with him. They simply moved in hard, pulled him off the throne, sent him into exile, and let the young Shah, because it was a convenience to them, stay on the throne, but they gave him no real power. They ran the country.
The old Shah never saw his son again. Meanwhile, his capital, Tehran, was the scene of an historic meeting between the Allied warlords.
When the Tehran conference was held, the Shah was not even permitted to be the host to the meeting in his own country and in his own city. The British and the Russians and the Americans set up the arrangements for the meeting and carefully kept the Shah outside. It's true, at the end of the meeting, each of them in his own way met with the Shah, although he had to come to them. They thought that there might be some role for him in the post-war era, but he was clearly nothing but a puppet in his own country. A terrible thing for a young man who had been overawed by a powerful father and now was being overawed by the great powers who effectively controlled the country which he was supposed to rule.
Power, like nature, abhors a vacuum. After the war, Britain could no longer maintain the old order in Iran, and with the country seemingly up for grabs, the Russians prepared to move in.
The Russians challenged the Americans in Iran. They challenged the Americans by attempting to take over northern Iran, Azerbaijan. Harry Truman defied the Russians on that and demanded that they withdraw from northern Iran. And in this process, the Shah, who was on the throne, received American support.
Any sovereign state, that foreign troops are continuing to remain in its territory without its consent beyond the date authorized by treaty.
The Americans said that they supported the Shah and they supported his right to rule his country. And this was the first important leg up for the Shah.
The Soviets withdrew, assuming, as everyone else did, that the Shah would not last long. His father had died in exile in 1944, leaving behind many powerful enemies inside Iran. On his travels abroad, the Shah might well envy the popular figurehead role enjoyed by constitutional monarchs in countries like Britain, so different from his own precarious rule in Persia. In 1949, an assassination attempt showed how vulnerable he was. He had no heir. His queen, Fawzia, had already returned to Egypt. In 1951, the Shah remarried. His bride was Soraya Esfandiary, daughter of the most powerful family in Iran. She would remain empress for 7 years, but she bore the Shah no children, and she too eventually had to go. The wedding took place against a background of political crisis.
The Shah's hold on his country in the years after World War II was still somewhat precarious. And this ability to rule his country and to stay on the throne was strongly challenged by an unusual man named Mosaddegh. Mosaddegh was a charismatic leader. He was an old man when he came to power in Iran. And Mosaddegh came into power basically on a platform that Iran's oil belonged to Iran. At that time, Iran's oil belonged to the British and a consortium of other foreign countries. As his power grew, his threat to the Shah increased. And soon, Mosaddegh was casting the Shah aside and saying that he would rule and the Shah must go. And go the Shah did. He literally fled his country in fear of Mosaddegh.
The nationalization of Iran's oil produced an international crisis. The United States concluded that the turbulence created by Mosaddegh was playing into Soviet hands and they would have to get rid of him. President Eisenhower authorized a CIA countermove against Mosaddegh, something which would not be repeated in the later crisis when the Ayatollah Khomeini successfully challenged the throne. But in those days, America had the will and the power to take such action. Liberal use of dollar bills and Persian rial notes secured a mob which shouted support for the Shah. Army units rallied to the monarchy, and Mosaddegh was overthrown. It was the CIA's first and most successful coup. The Shah returned more than ever a prisoner of his friends.
Gentlemen, His Imperial Majesty, Mohammad Reza Shāh Pahlavī, Shāhanshāh of Iran.
In the Forum of the United Nations, the Shah's title sounded impressive enough.
I accept your greeting in behalf of the nation which I represent. Not one of the largest countries in the world, it is true, but one of the oldest and one of the most persistent in honoring all that pertains to the elevation of the human spirit. Here,
The Shah was back,
assembly,
but of course any ruler who comes back through the sufferance or the manipulations of another power is not powerful on his own. And his first move, really, was to try and establish an international identity.
as equal.
And so for the first time he went to New York and went to the United Nations, and there he addressed the UN.
I make this appeal. Do not fail us. Give us the future. Give us the inner assurance.
What he said was not so important. The fact that he did it and commanded the presence and the attention of the international community and showed that he was a ruler with vision and dreams for his country was what was important. It was his first step to build a personal power on the foundation which in essence had been given him by the aid and the intervention of the United States.
Then, but not until then, will mankind, released from fear, live in a brighter, happier world.
In the aftermath of the Mosaddegh upheaval, the Shah's secret police, Savak, took savage reprisals. The Shah, however, continued to canvass his dynastic pretensions abroad, visiting West and East and even the Pope. He could never be sure that the United States would not replace him with an alternative regime based on parliamentary democracy. Although the Shah later amnestied many of those arrested, for years his country was rated among the lowest in the world for human rights. With the problem of the succession still unsolved, the Shah took as his third wife Farah Diba, daughter of a well-to-do Tehran family. They were married in December 1959, and in October 1960, she gave birth to a son. At last, the Shah had an heir. The Crown Prince would grow up surrounded by security precautions and have to face a desperately uncertain future. In the 1960s, however, it seemed as if the Shah might, after all, pull it off. As oil revenues increased, he stepped up his program for modernizing Iran at all levels of society.
I well remember in those years going to Tehran and having a long talk with him. He saw a new Iran in which the whole of his people would participate. It was a revolution from above, so-called white revolution, which he conceived. And the foundation of this was to give land to the peasants. And he himself put some of the enormous holdings which he had thanks to his father, who had stolen most of it from the rich families of Persia. And he began to give those lands back to the peasants. But although the Shah really was a man of the 20th century, he was captured still in many of the conventions that were more medieval than 20th century. And so in spite of his white revolution, the land, or much of it, did not go back to the peasants. One way or another, money passed under the table, and in spite of his great programs, it didn't trickle down. Instead of the money trickling down, it began to accumulate up, and fortunes began to be founded out of Iran's oil. Fortunes that went into the hands of some old families, modern entrepreneurs, builders and contractors and real estate speculators, and then all of the foreign investors attracted by the honey of the oil and the enormous money to be made out of investment in Iran. If the Shah had carried out his program for the peasants, instead of buying planes, he probably would be sitting secure on his throne today. But the Shah bought planes like gumdrops. And some of those gumdrops could cost as much as $50 million apiece.
In 1971, the Shah staged an extraordinary ceremony. In one more attempt to win legitimacy for his rule, he paraded his army in an exotic reminder of Persia's 2,500 years of history. But before the decade was out, his dynasty had fallen.
In the last 10 years of his reign, the Shah thought that he had bought security through his weapons and through his police, through Sadak. But neither the Shah nor Sadak moved against that force which was older than the Shah. This was the power of the Church of Muhammad. And because there were millions of people who in one way or another had been oppressed by the regime, they found the only vehicle for this expression was the mosque. And against the mosque, the Shah was in essence powerless. The one body, the one faith, the one power against which the Shah could not maintain his rule. The portrait of the Shah goes up in flames. The Shah has gone up in flames. He's been driven from his country, in all likelihood, never to return. He gave Iran universities. He gave it medicine and hospitals. He started new industries. He gave it technology and science. The Shah is gone, but that will long continue as the foundation of the modern Iran.
In a world where oil is king, the Pahlavis will not be remembered for the beauty of their monuments like earlier rulers of Persia. The gushing oil, like a genie escaping from a bottle, has changed forever the image of Iran.